Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to do an in-depth, step-by-step discussion of how to tune your arrows to your crossbow. So stay tuned. All right, everybody, I wanted to do this video because now is the time, that a lot of people are getting their setups ready for deer season. It's right around the corner. And I've been getting a lot of arrow tuning questions, which is fantastic. I'm so glad you guys are taking this up, are putting in the time to just make your setups more accurate and more lethal. And I have definitely done, you know, several videos on this, but I wanted to, I guess, just maybe talk in detail, step by step, about at least how I do this and how it's worked for me. And before we start, I definitely have to give a shout out to Troy Fowler, the Ranch Fairy, because really this is his process. This is his process that I learned from watching his YouTube channel on compound bows, which I did for my compounds. I still do for my compounds as well, but I just kind of translated it to a crossbow. And to be perfectly honest, it's easier, in my opinion, to do with a crossbow, simply because you have way less human element shooting a crossbow and tuning your arrows to your bow than you do a compound bow. So thank you, Troy, as always, for all the information that you put out there and what you've been able to do and how you've been able to help the archery community, both for vertical bows as well as crossbows. So let's just start, you guys, with some of the things that you need. We are going to be shooting, or I like to shoot through paper to do this. And that paper, it can be anything. Any piece of paper that is easy to shoot through. I just shoot through computer paper. If you've got some, type of big roll of paper, that's totally fine too. A couple keys though with shooting through paper is you want to make sure that that paper is held nice and tight. You don't want it flapping around. Some of our old videos, we did have it flapping around, but you can use literally anything to hold whatever size piece of paper that you have tight. We've got this little welded, just carbon steel rod that we made that we can stick in the ground. You can use two arrow shafts, like two old arrow shafts. You can stick them in the ground, tape your piece of paper on there. You can make a little wooden frame, or even like a cardboard box. You can take a cardboard box, cut out a frame so you can tape a piece of paper on there. Really, you just want to make sure that that piece of paper is held tight. And you want to also make sure that that piece of paper, I like to make sure at least, that that piece of paper is level. So I like to make sure that however I'm resting my crossbow when I'm shooting, that my crossbow on my rest is level. That could be with a like a lead sled, bog death grip. That's what I use. I mean, it can literally be shot bags or whatever. You can put a level across your limbs to just figure out, making sure that your bow is level. But I also like to look and make sure that my piece of paper is level, just as a reference point for my crosshairs. So just some little details just to make sure you don't have any cant with your bow where you might be chasing something when you're shooting through that piece of paper. So you got your paper, you've got it held nice and tight, you've got everything level to start shooting. And that piece of paper we're going to put at 5 yards, 5-ish yards. And the reason for 5 yards, I this is how far Troy shoots at them. But the reason for it is you want to catch that arrow flight going through that piece of paper before your fletchings take over and start correcting that arrow flight. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to see how well our bow is launching the arrow. We don't want to do it downrange where even if our arrow launches crazy, our fletchings have time to correct it and stabilize that flight. We want to see how it is at launch or very close to launch. So that's the reason for that 5-ish yards. Another key thing is you want to make sure if your paper's at 5 yards, you want to make sure your target is, let's just say, like 2 yards behind it, or more if you want to. Really, the key is you want to make sure that your arrow passes completely through that piece of paper before it hits your target. Because if it doesn't, If your arrow is still in the piece of paper when it hits the target, it's likely going to wiggle around. It's probably not going to hit that target. Basically, when it hits the target, it's going to move around a little bit, and it's going to tear that paper in a way that is not representative of how your bow is shooting that arrow. So you'll chase your tail a little bit if you figure out that, oh crap, my target is too close to my piece of paper, and what I'm actually seeing as far as paper tears go is the impact of the target. So just make sure that it is far enough back where your arrow can completely pass through the piece of paper before it hits the target. And the reason for the paper, I guess I should say, is just so we have a way to kind of see how that arrow is flying at that 5-yard mark, at that area where our fletchings haven't come in and started stabilizing arrow flight yet. So you've got a level, you've got paper, you've got your arrows, you need some field points, because what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how much weight up front our particular bow and our particular arrow shaft like. So I like to use the Serious Archery Ranch Fairy Test Kit, and I have the 200 to 300 grain kit. And then I kind of supplement that kit with 100 grain field points, which I feel like everybody has. Oftentimes they come with the arrows that come with your bow. And then it's really easy to find 125 and 150 grain field points. I don't have a 175, but I haven't really found that to be an issue as far as, whatever, a gap in my field point weights. So having a 100, a 125, and a 150, and then a 200 to 300 in 25 grain increments has worked really well for me. Serious Archery does have a 100 to 200 grain kit. If you want to buy both, you totally can. If you wanted to just buy the whole, as the range of point weights as you can on Amazon too, and not buy from Serious, that's totally fine too. I just find it's hard. It's hard to find 200 to 300 grain points in those 25 grain increments, but it's really easy to find 100s, 125s, and 150s. So that's what I've got. Ranch Fairy Test Kit, 200 to 300 grains, and then 100, 125, and 150. And I like to start just with 100 grain field points. Some people like to shoot 100 grain field points. That's totally fine. If that's what you want to do, a part of this process will apply to you. I also like that because the less weight you have up front of your arrow, the less your arrow is going to flex, or kind of the stiffer your arrow will be. The more weight you put up front, the more your arrow is going to flex. And that's simply because when you shoot your bow and your string starts loading your arrow, it starts pushing the back before it starts pushing the front. And the more weight you have up front, the more your arrow is going to bend, the more that force is going to kind of have to load up before the front starts moving. And I find that it's oftentimes easier with that stiffest, configuration to kind of find which fletching position shoots the best. So I start with 100 grain field points, and you're going to take however many arrows you've got, whatever it is. It could be 3, could be 6, could be a dozen. However many you've got, you're going to do this whole process for. And guys, I just will tell you, this process, it takes a little bit of time. It takes a number of shots, but ultimately, I have found it to be extremely valuable, inexpensive, and just gives me more confidence in the woods when I know exactly how my arrows are shooting, making sure I'm shooting the best arrow first, all that kind of stuff. To me, it's well worth the time and the effort. Make sure you guys are shooting a lot of shots. Make sure you are waxing your string, waxing your rail to your manufacturer's recommendations, just to make sure everything with the bow, you're not wearing something funny, or you're not, just excessive wear on your bow. Make sure you're keeping up with that as you do this process. So you're going to start with whatever, just arrow number 1. You're going to put that 100 grain field point on it. You're going to shoot the odd feather down, and I'm just assuming you guys have factory fletched arrows. If you've fletched your own, you're going to pick whichever fletching position is the first one. And you are going to shoot through that piece of paper and you're going to see how it tears. And then I like to shoot all three of them. If by chance the first fletching position you shoot gives you a perfect bullet hole through paper and you want to stop and just mark that as like, yep, this is the fletching position I'm going to go with, that's totally fine. But I like to just confirm that of the three fletching positions, I know which one is the best one. So I shoot the odd feather down first, and then I shoot one of the other veins next, and then I shoot the third one. And I see of those three shots with arrow number one, which fletching position produced the best tear through paper. And when I say a perfect bullet hole is what you're looking for, or close to it, what you're looking for is essentially one hole where both your point and your nock are passing through the same point on that piece of paper, and your fletching tears are a nice even 120 degrees. What you will see on a bad tear is something a little more oblong, kind of like a pill shape, where it could be up, down, left or right, or on angles or stuff like that. But you're basically going to see a bigger tear, and that's where your point and your nock are entering that piece of paper differently. So you'll get a bigger tear, and then you'll usually, in conjunction with that, get fletching tears that are not even, not the same length of a fletching tear, and they're not 120 degrees. So what I see a lot of are like a T-shaped tear. So I'll get kind of like a pill shape for my point and my nock. That'll be my hole. And then a lot of times the fletchings will look like a T. So the two on the top or two on the bottom will be very straight and maybe a little shorter. And then you'll have kind of a big, long other one where they're clearly not 120 degrees. So I'll throw some images up too for you guys. But basically, you're going to take arrow number one, shoot all three fletching positions, and then you're going to pick which fletching position was the best. Which of those three was the best? And then you're going to Sharpie on it. I like to Sharpie, like a big black arrow on it that says, this is the fletching position that is the best. This is the one that's going to be down on my rail. And that is what you guys are going to start paying attention to. You're not going to pay attention to odd colors or anything like that. You're going to pay attention to what you've Sharpied. And for arrow number one, you're going to set it aside and you're going to move to arrow number two. Arrow number two, you're going to do the exact same thing, 100 grain field point. You're going to shoot each of the three fletching positions, and you're going to pick which fletching position was the best, and you're going to Sharpie on that one. But now with arrow number two, your best tear or your best fletching position for arrow number two, you're going to compare to the best one of arrow number one. And you're going to say, is arrow number two better or worse? And you're going to start sorting them. So ultimately, what you're going to have is each arrow, the best fletching position for you to shoot down on your rail, and then each arrow kind of ranked as far as which one tore the absolute best out of the three fletching positions, which was number two, which was number three, which was number 4, 5, 6, whatever it is. So you've got kind of a hierarchy, if you will, of your arrows. So that's where, there's a lot of shots that come into that, but I think it's really valuable to have basically know exactly which one is your very best arrow, which one is number two, which one is number three. And let's just say we're shooting 6 arrows here. I'm going to take my top 3 and rank them 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to set those aside. Those are going to be my hunting arrows, and then my arrows 4, 5, and 6. Even though I've nock tuned them and I've paper tuned them, I know which fletching position is the best. Those ones didn't tear quite as well, so those are going to be my practice arrows. All right, so now we've got our arrows ranked 1 through 6. We know for each of those arrows which fletching position is the best one being launched from our bow. And this is important. Make sure you're doing this with the same shaft, because if you change arrow shafts, this whole process can change. And I'll explain that here in a minute between like different shafts and different bows and things like that. But they're all the same shaft. You've got them all ranked. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take, I would probably take arrow number 1. You could probably take any of them, but I would take arrow number 1. And I would now start adding point weight. So now what I'm going to do is I know that this arrow in this fletching position shoots really good out of my bow. Now I want to see how much weight can I put up front with that exact same fletching position and continue to shoot it before my flight starts deteriorating, before it starts getting bad. So I'll start next with a 125. I'll shoot that. If it's still good, move to a 150, shoot that, move to a 200 or 225, all that. You're just going to keep shooting the different point weights with that best arrow, and you guys will find a point where that number 1 arrow, that fletching tear will start to get worse. And then you kind of know, okay, I've got my window now of point weight that this particular shaft and this particular bow, whatever your arrow shaft and bow is, that it likes as far as a point weight. And then you guys get to make, kind of the decision as far as how you want to configure your arrow. I like to do that with just my number 1 arrow. So once I figure out what point weight, let's say it shot good from 100 grains to 200 grains. That's my window. And then when I went to 225, things started to change. This particular arrow shaft, like that, should stay the same across the board. So you don't necessarily, if you don't want to, I have found, have to shoot all 6 of your arrows or all 3 of your hunting arrows with the different point weights. Sometimes I do like to, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, sometimes I do like to take maybe my worst arrow and add that point weight to it and see if it cleans up a little bit, because sometimes they might fly a little better with a little bit of point weight to them. So you totally can, if you want to shoot all of them again with the different point weights, go for it. But what I have found normally is my best arrow I'm going to kind of use as the gauge for the particular shaft that I'm shooting and the particular bow that I'm shooting to figure out my point weight range. And then I might go back. Let's say it, 200 was the max. 200 still shot good. When I went to 225, it started getting bad. I might shoot arrow 6, arrow 5, and see if they clean up a little bit with a 200 grain point. So now that you have knock-tuned all your arrows and you have figured out what the particular arrow shaft that you have in your bow that you are shooting that arrow out of, what it likes as far as weight up front, now this is kind of where you guys get to make some choices as far as how you want to configure your arrow. So it's perfectly fine to leave the inserts in your arrow and just buy broadheads and field points to match whatever it is that you want to shoot, that you proved by shooting through paper still shoots really well. So we'll use this example of these Killer Instinct Hyper arrows. They shot very well up to, I think it was a 200 grain field point. So if I wanted to, I'd go buy 200 grain broadheads, 200 grain field points, and I could shoot those and be confident. If I wanted to, have as much FOC and as much total arrow weight as I possibly can, which is what I personally want to do. But there's not a ton of options out there, or not as many options with a 200 grain arrowhead weight. So what you can do is you can take the insert out and you can weigh it and you can see what your total upfront arrow weight was that this particular shaft liked, because that is what really matters, the insert weight plus the point weight. So the inserts on these, they're usually 65 grains. So I know with this particular shaft that 265 grains up front works well. And what I personally do is instead of buying 200 grain field points, 200 grain broadheads, I really like 150 grain broadheads. The reason I like those is because you get a little bit wider range of stuff. You're kind of right on the edge of replaceable blade, fixed blades, things like the Magnus products. They've got a lot of 150 grain stuff, and you guys know those are my favorite. You're right on the edge of all those premium broadheads. A lot of them, or most of them, the Serious Archery, or the Tough Heads, the VPAs, the Iron Wills, those type of like high quality cutthroats, high quality machined broadheads. 150 grains is usually where they start. And you can also find, if you are wanting to shoot a mechanical, you can oftentimes find mechanicals in that 150 grain range, more of them in the 125. But basically, you get more options with 150 grains. So what I do is I take the insert out and I replace it with a 110 grain insert. So I add insert weight and I take a little off the point, and I'm at 260 grains. I know it's not exactly the 265, but it works out just fine, at least for me. I guess just note that it is a little bit different as far as FOC, or as far as how your arrow behaves, of insert weight, like adding insert weight versus just adding point weight. If you just add point weight, you're going to have more mass out towards the front of your arrow. So your FOC is going to be a little bit different. Oftentimes, if you add insert weight, those inserts are a little longer. So you've got, like a little bit more of a glued portion in your arrow shaft that, really changes your spine, or changes how much your arrow flexes. Those are real things, and those are things that I think are true. What I have not seen personally is a difference in arrow flight or performance. I think those differences of having, a lighter insert and more point weight versus insert weight, higher insert weight and less point weight, I haven't seen a difference. I'm not saying that the difference isn't there. I just think, at least for the setups that I've been shooting, that difference is negligible with my margin for error, and I guess kind of, realistic expectations when a broadhead is on there, like those types of things. I haven't had any problems with adding insert weight and going with a lighter point versus keeping the insert light and going a heavier point. So that is totally up to you guys. So now that you have found your total arrow weight, I guess, what, I should say this, because this had a couple of questions. Getting an insert out. What I like to do is a little bit of a combo of, I like to use either a drill bit or something to kind of like smack the insert out of the arrow, that comboed with heat. So what I have found is that if you just use heat, a lot of guys will put a field point on their arrow and they'll heat it up and they'll try to pull it out with pliers. And I have done that, and that has worked. I've also done that and I've damaged the carbon. I've got it too hot, where when I pull that insert out, I get like a curly cue of carbon. I have done just the straight drill bit. And what I say is, you take a drill bit. I don't know if I've got one laying around here. I'm sorry, you guys. But basically, the end that you would chuck in your drill, just the flat cylindrical end, you're going to take your knock off and you're going to put that down in your arrow shaft. And you want something that is going to slide in your arrow shaft, like one of the biggest ones that slides freely. And what you're going to do is, you're just going to hold like the end of your arrow so that drill bit doesn't come out. And you guys need to be careful, or do this in an area where it's okay to do it. But you're basically just going to go like that. You're just going to whip your arrow. You're going to make that drill bit slide really fast and bang into your insert, and it will knock your insert out. A lot of times you can do just the drill bit method. Sometimes if your insert is being a little bit of a pain in the butt, I like to then put the field point on, put just a little bit of heat on it. And when I put heat on it, I use a candle. Don't use a blowtorch or something that's going to heat it up really fast, but just roll that field point, nice and slowly in a candle. Feel on the carbon, feel that it's getting warm, then try the drill bit again. And usually I don't have a problem knocking inserts out. So that is how you guys can change your insert. So once you have figured out how you want to combo it up, let's say you've built your arrows, you've figured out, okay, I want to shoot this point weight, this insert weight. Now it's time to go to broadheads. And so I take those 3 best arrows, and I've got them numbered. Arrow number 1, arrow number 2, arrow number 3. And I'm going to take my pack of broadheads, my 3 broadheads, and I'm going to shoot each arrow with each broadhead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out between my 3 best arrows and my broadheads which pairs shoot the best. So what I want to do is I'm just trying to mate up the the combination of broadhead and arrow shaft to give me basically my 3 best hunting arrows that I know each configuration or each pair is the best arrow flight I can get. And the reason I'm doing that is because broadheads, just like arrows, none of them are made perfect. They all have tolerances built into them. And by shooting, 3 different broadheads with the same arrow, you are likely to get, and it might be small, but you are likely to get some different arrow flight just by, by the tolerances that are built into that particular arrow, how straight it is, and how straight, how flat, how well aligned the blades are of each particular broadhead. While it may be minuscule, it's a good thing to do just to pair up your best pairs. And once you know, okay, with arrow number 1, my best arrow, this is the broadhead that shot the best. So I'm going to Sharpie a number 1 on that broadhead. And now that broadhead and that arrow, that is a pair, and that pair is going to stay together. Same thing. Next up, broadhead number 2. This is my arrow number 2. This is my second best arrow, and this broadhead is the one that flew best with it. That is going to be my second shot. That's going to be the second arrow coming out of my quiver. Same thing with arrow number 3. So now you guys have the absolute best pair you can make on your best arrow, the one that you know is coming out of your bow first when you're out there hunting, and then your backup arrow, your third arrow, that kind of stuff. It might seem tedious. It might seem like a lot of work, but like I said, it is a lot of times it is just time. And I think you guys, and from what I have seen, how much you can clean up your groups, how much more consistent you can be, how well you can get fixed blade broadheads to fly out of crossbows. It's honestly, it's pretty darn cool. Compared to if you just slapped a broadhead on a random arrow and tried to shoot it and adjust your scope and stuff. I think you guys would be surprised how much this process will just clean things up for you and make you more confident. If you shoot fixed blade broadheads, some broadheads, they just fly better than others. And what you guys might see is even with a tuned arrow and broadhead match to get that perfect pair, because fixed blade broadheads, they have more surface area, they have more drag, they might impact a little different than your field points. And what I see a lot of times is I see that they hit a little low. So especially at extended ranges, if you're going to try to stretch them out and really see how well they fly, you might see, and I'm not talking a lot low, but I'm talking like, inch or two, just low. You don't want to see erratic flight or left or right, or it's sticking in the target, in goofy angles. If it is, straight down the line, left and right, but just a little low, that's okay. That might just be, depending on what broadhead you're shooting, drag from it being a fixed blade broadhead. And if you need to adjust your optics to match that, that's totally okay. You just don't want to see a bunch of crazy flyers left and right. Mechanical guys, if you shoot a mechanical broadhead, this will help you too, because I know mechanicals, they say on the box they are field point accurate. I know they have a profile that is closer to a field point, but they don't have a profile exactly like a field point. They are not exactly like a field point, and they naturally will fly a little bit different. And I think a lot of times they just fly within people's margin for error. So we just think, oh yeah, it flies just like my field point. It doesn't. It just flies within your, capability, or, close to your field point. But It's not exactly like your field point. So doing this is going to help you guys too. And last point is that this whole process, once you get this figured out for your particular crossbow and the particular arrow shaft that you're shooting, you can kind of expedite it because, you know, the shafts that you're going to shoot, they should be very, very similar if you're buying the same brand. Like if you're buying, you know, these Killer Instinct Hyper arrows, or if you're buying the Sirius Phoenix arrows, like once you figure out kind of the recipe that your bow likes, if you buy more of them, you can probably just be like, okay, I know that this shaft likes, you know, whatever, 200 grain field points. I'm going to keep the inserts exactly the same, or however it is that you're going to do it. And then just go ahead and knock tune. Just go ahead and figure out what the best fletching position is and go. Because you've already figured out what the shaft, you know, likes and doesn't like as far as point weights and stuff for your bow. So you can expedite it a little bit. But what I will say with a big but is if you change your bow, if you get a different bow, or you shoot a different arrow, it might not be the same. So like different bows have a different, you know, basically like, if you want to call it like an energy curve, or basically a different way that they apply energy to the arrow. Like they're all different. Power curve, maybe that's the right word. Same thing. Shafts, they can be different. A lot of them are similar, but a lot of them are not. So if you change either getting a new bow or getting different arrows, you might have to repeat this process just to make sure you've got everything all dialed in, you know, to the level at which you had it originally. So, all right. I think that covers everything as far as my process, which I adopted, and thanks again, from Troy Fowler in his work with compound bows, and translated it to a crossbow. And I hope that helps you guys out. I hope that helps answer a bunch of questions. I'm going to put product links, you guys, down below to a lot of the stuff that I described, or a lot of the stuff that I use. And a few things that I didn't mention, you know, in this video, like fletchings, if you want to fletch your own arrows, or fletching jigs, or things like that. I'm going to put a bunch of stuff down in the description below. So check that out if you're looking for particular pieces, parts, products, things like that. And definitely let me know if you guys have questions. You can post your questions down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. You guys can hit me up on, I usually answer Facebook a little faster, or you can shoot me emails if you have specific questions that I didn't cover in this video. But I hope this helps you guys out, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please, as always, do me a favor, hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon on the next video. Take care, God bless, and remember, be a sportsman, make a sportsman.